Okay. All right. So it's 8:06 now. This is the Planning, Zoning, and Housing Committee meeting of the RTM. It is June 23rd. We are here to discuss and vote on the resolution in front of the RTM for Monday, which will be taking action on approving the contract and appropriation for the purchase of Great Island. I also see Michael Castello has joined us as well. All right. We will reserve the ability to go into executive session when we need to discuss certain topics, but for now, until we have a couple other participants that I'm anticipating joining us, we're gonna proceed forward. So let's just do it.
They'll be coming up shortly. We're still in another meeting downstairs, but
Okay.
I left, but I think they'll be up shortly.
Okay. All right. Terrific. From my understanding, Monica is going to be joining us, and she wants to take the group into executive session and give us some updates that are obviously considered privileged at this point. So when we get to that point, that's what we'll do. We'll pivot and do that. So the last session that we had, there was quite a few questions that the group had come up with, and some of them really centered around the financials. I have spent the last, from our session since last Thursday, watching much of the other subcommittee meetings for Public Works, Public Health and Safety, the Board of Finance, and trying to get updated on some of the other questions that we've had. Has anybody else had an opportunity to get up to speed and dive in and get a little more educated on the financial components? Because that was certainly an issue that was permeating through the group.
Yeah,
Amy?
Yes.
I have. I watched the F&B meeting as well as the finance board, and similarly, I'm not a finance person, so I don't know if you want me to actually talk about any of it, but definitely feel, it did pass both of those committees, and certainly seems like on the financial side, the other boards are comfortable that the town can afford the project, and I was pleased that the Finance and Budget Committee of the RTM seemed to spend a little more time on including some of the operating expenses in their budget that were left out of the Finance Board's budget. But yet, even with that addition, they still seemed comfortable that it wasn't going to be too big of a hit to the mill rate. And I think they're going to try to, I know Jack Davis is planning on submitting a report to the entire RTM, and hopefully he'll include his summary included the sort of last page of it went through all, like, basically every $500,000 of assessed house value and sort of what the impact would be on the taxes, both if we do nothing and if we buy Great Island. And you can see that, yeah, our taxes are going to go up, big shock either way, but the incremental difference with adding Great Island, even with including in their model some of the operating expenses, they felt was not extreme. Obviously, that's a personal decision for people about those numbers, but I found it very helpful, and hopefully he'll be able to send that around soon to the whole RTM.
I just spoke with Jack 5 minutes ago, and he's working on trying to get that out tomorrow.
Okay, terrific. Anybody else have any input on this particular topic? Werner, I know you had some concerns. Were you able to find time in your schedule to dive into some of these Board of Finance meetings and additional committee meetings?
No, I was not able to dial into any of these, and I reached out to Jim Palin and John Zagrodzky, and I haven't heard anything back.
Okay.
Probably
There was.
I think it'd be hard to reach people given the number of meetings. I mean, we've got them all overlapping even tonight. Best to probably go to channel 79 and watch some of those meetings. That's what I did for most of them. I'm about 2/3 of the way through F&B's meeting last night. I got to watch the rest of it when I get home after this.
Yeah.
I mean, I was going to add, we had a District 6 meeting on Tuesday, and Jim Palin was there. I think they're all super busy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're Right now, we had a District 2 and 4, and Monica and Jim are both there, and then they're going to dial into this shortly.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, they've gone through it. If you have the time, there's a lot of information out there on TV 79 that dives into a lot of questions. And Caroline, I did watch your district caucus, and there was, add minutia around the bonding issues and some of the financial assumptions. It was quite a heated debate. So there was
Yes.
Yes, every stone was being turned over on that one. So, so I thought it was great because, as you watch all of these committee meetings, there's a lot of questions being asked and answered to the best of their ability. So, if you still have outlying questions, I encourage you to really utilize that TV 79. If we cannot get them answered tonight, there's a wealth of information out there. Okay. Speaking of our committee and our questions, Steve Olvani, one of the questions that we had for the group was the location of the shellfish beds along the coastline. Is there any clarity that you can provide, or where the status of information lies on that right now, and what we need to baseline assume on that topic of that question before we move forward?
I'm not, everything I've gotten on those is through other people that are involved, whether it be first selectman's officer or town council. But they were still researching them and looking into who controls them. The Ziegler and the Steincross still kept them out of the contract, so we're technically not buying them. The report that I got is that they were used last year. For a couple other years, they were not used in the recent past. From where I sit, the thing that matters to me is if someone redoes the seawall or someone does a break wall there, how far, if there's a quote unquote setback from a break wall that matters to a shellfish bed. I don't know the answer to that question because I don't know where they are. The other point that came up is access to the dock. If you ever been to that dock where the fireboat is, there are some tables there that people fillet fish on and do some, taking from the boat off, a shellfish off the boat or a fish off the boat onto the shore and then drive out. So that has to be looked into a little bit. The other question was if little Johnny Jones dove off the side of the water into the water, is he going to fall into a shellfish bed or an oyster bed? And that question was still being looked into.
Okay.
We caught for I dove into a shellfish bed and I broke it or something.
Okay. Okay, so it sounds like even the owners the ownership topic is under question. It's not just a matter of getting at the information. It's something that we most likely won't have the answer to. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, but at the end of the day, you're not buying them anyway.
Yep.
To me,
Okay.
someone else has got to get access to it, and obviously you can get access to them from the waterways. It's a public water. But if wants to take the shellfish offshore, they got to bring it in. You think of it as a lobster trap. There are lobster traps out there. They don't all come in through the same spot. They can go. You could farm those shellfish beds and take them out through South Oregon if you wanted to. You don't have to come on the land side.
Okay. One of the other questions regarding that our group came up with before was around the easement of the access point of coming through the access road from Rings End Bridge into the property. When I watched the Public Works meeting, there was Ed Gentile was involved there, and he presented to that group, and he did say that they looked at some information with regards and assumptions as to where the roads might need to be expanded to two-way, and they had come up with some preliminary numbers. With regards to making a requirement of the road to be 20 to 22 feet wide, and that it was required in some areas, but not certainly on all of the roads that were in place between the Goodwise River Road and to where that turnaround circle was. And so he thought the range of widening roads would be between 400 and 600,000. That's what he stated in the Public Works meeting. He also talked about parking and the idea of having various, degrees of parking. This is just under the case of the baseline case of just making the property available and accessible to the public. This is not by any stretch of the imagination full parking or full roadways, because we don't know what the use is yet, but this is just under that base case, opening up for the public and making it accessible and safe. What would that require? And I think a lot of groups pose that question back to town officials, so we would have an understanding of what minimum amounts would be. And he envisioned parking to be more like not asphalt, but gravel, and have it in various pockets along the roadways, not just one giant parking lot as of now, because we don't know where the uses are and where those cars would need to go, but just for the access would be, between 300 and 350 if it was gravel, and if there was a discussion of making it more asphalt, then it would be more like 500 to 550. There was no determination on costs for bathrooms, because you really need to determine the use first. And quite honestly, a lot of our parks don't have bathrooms. And that was the update that I was able to ascertain from watching other town officials speak with regards to that question.
Can I ask
Amy, may
a follow-up on that, Amy?
Amy,
Sure.
can I interrupt you for a quick second? I'm sorry. Just want to let you know that Jack Davis is in the room with me here, so just want to let you
Okay.
know on the call.
Oh, wonderful.
Because we're doing this from Town Hall and an iPad, I can't really have the camera on very well, but I will let you know as people come into the room.
Besides
Yep,
that, he's
thank you.
better than I am.
No, my camera's off. No one's looking at me either. The angle's bad.
Jack, do you have any hair left after pulling your hair after all this time?
A cap.
I'll be honest, I said this downstairs just before. If I could sell the 6 pieces of paper we went through last night, we could pay for the island based upon what the demand is. I'm trying to finalize this with Jenny, who's on her way down to Jersey, so we can put together PDF so that I can get it out to every RTM member with some explanation tomorrow.
Okay.
And then we can go over it on Monday, but that way you get a chance to see it. I'm going to, when everybody else is done here, I'll give you a brief update on what our numbers are. They are different from the Board of Finances.
Okay. We'll hold that for
Mr.
that
Wheeler
thought.
also joined the room.
Yep. Thank you. Okay. So were there any additional questions regards to, we had talked about, it was important for us to just understand that, what the expectations were on making it accessible. Any other questions on that?
I just had one question, and I'll go ahead and watch the public work. But if they've looked at numbers, obviously they've looked at feasibility as well, because that was one of my concerns, the feasibility of actually widening the roads in that area with the wetlands in the area, et cetera.
Yes. Ed did a tour of the area, and he looked at where he thought it was required, and, and came up with estimates based on that.
Okay. And then
He was not questioned. There was not a lot of questioning to pose to him about feasibility.
Okay. And I guess the other access questions we have to save for executive session.
I think so. The other access questions we need to save for executive session. And
Okay.
as soon as Monica and Wayne join in, we will pivot and go in that direction.
Wayne was,
Okay, thank you.
Wayne was up here a moment ago. He was walking down to Monica's office to do the call from there. But
Okay.
I think Monica's still in the district caucus. I would agree.
Okay. Okay. It'll hopefully be shortly. Okay. With regards to Public Works, there was also a lot of discussion, which brings us to our next question about the governance of the island. That topic was brought up in a couple of committees, and it was again batted back and forth around that the Board of Selectmen will be looking into evaluating ways to govern the island, whether it's more of a conservancy model, similar to what is done at Waveney or Todd's Point, or if there's a commission type model. They need to dive into the pros and cons of those structures and what will meet the needs best of the town, or as a subcommittee of the Board of Selectmen. So there's a lot of questioning about how the Great Island will be governed, and decision making and financial ownership will where that lies. So there is no answer to be given to us today, and it's something that needs to be thoroughly examined, and the pros and cons of a couple of different structures. So I don't have a clear answer for you on that, other than the Board of Selectmen has represented that they're committed to evaluating what's best. Anybody else want to add if they have additional knowledge on that topic or questions? No? Okay. Okay. Then lastly, they're part and parcel, and maybe Jack, this might be a good time for you to weigh in, particularly on a financial question that was raised about the rental income.
Sure.
From what I can gather from Monica's answers in multiple sessions when questioned on this, it was most of the tenants are month to month. Some of them have an expiration term that expires I think at the end of March in 2023. We do not know what the uses are going to be for Great Island. That's going to be a process going to take a while to evaluate and have community input and decision making, and that I'm not clear as to what the assumptions are with regards to the rental income. That I've heard two things. One, that they will absorb the income as a way to offset and defray expenses, but yet at the same time, we really can't grant public access to the property while we have these kind of tenants in place. So, Jack, since I know you are much more attuned to the financials, can you make a representation to the group about what is being assumed and what you know?
Yes. So if we pass the acquisition and the bonding of these two issues, there is a third resolution that will set up a special revenue fund for Great Island for at least fiscal year 23. And
Yeah, I saw that, and I passed it on to the group. Yep.
right, the Gatsby is the Government Accounting Standards Board. Says that in special revenue funds, the revenue from the source of the revenue has to pay for the expenses. Now, we have that, as you know, anybody who's paying a sewer assessment fee, or you pay for if you're hooked up to the sewer, you pay your assessment in October, April. So the sewer fund is one such fund. They charge for what you flush away, and if you had a line put in, they charge for that. Similar one we just set up for the Park and Rec, because their revenue from their program fees go that way. Parking is a. So it's anticipated, at least after we buy it, assuming we close in August, that we're going to have 6 months of revenue, and that the operations, insurances, and other things like that will be in this special revenue fund, so it's not affecting our general fund or the fiscal budget that we just passed on the 6th. Should the revenue go away, those expenses have to come back into the operating budget, all right? There are 9 pieces of property that are generating rent. One of them is the stable, just the stable itself. It generates $18,000 a month. As was mentioned downstairs, it was not it was a commercial property in a residential area. There is a cease and desist out, but during that time that it's being worked out, they do have an opportunity to request a commercial operations there. It would go to the Planning and Zoning Commission. If the town wants to continue that, it would also have to go through the same process and get a waiver for that. That I cannot tell you whether or not we are doing it, not doing it, or anything else like that. That's just the process. But at least for the fiscal year 23, will be enough revenue in those 6 months to cover the expenses that we anticipate we will be incurring. Whether or not that fund continues for fiscal year 24, in the F&B model, we said it does not, and we put in $500,000 for operating expenses. Not that I have a detail. Some of our stuff is just placeholders, but I have a rough idea what it costs. You know, the people that are working there now are not union. They don't have a pension. They don't have health care. So just if we would just have the same 3 people there, it's going to cost us more than it was costing them, just because they would be part of the union and have those benefits, rightfully so.
And just for the record, Amy, Wayne Fox is in the room now as well.
Hi, Wayne. How are you? Thank you for joining us.
I'm sorry, I was downstairs with the caucus, it's listening down there.
And by the way, if I say anything wrong, you see me go out, it's because Wayne just kicked me.
Not because
Can I ask a process question? I have 2 new callers that are in that look like they are waiting to put in their names. If you've just joined the group, can you please identify yourself by verbally or writing in your identification?
This is Kirk Ruddy.
Kurt? All right. Thank you, Kurt. I see you. And I think the other person just dropped. Okay.
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 What was part 2 of that? I'm going to mention 2 things that I mentioned downstairs. I don't think it's mentioned enough. First of all, we all knew that this was a $175 million initial price, but about 40 acres from the initial deal aren't part of this deal. That includes the stone barn. I think it's important people understand we're not getting the stone barn. My daughter's very upset. And she's in DC and she's still upset. So the reason why the price is lower is because we're not buying the same property of what was originally offered. So that people should know. The second thing is, this is honestly a 2 to 10 year project. Anything that we rush into, I'm telling you, is the bad decision. And so if we truly want to figure out, I mean, I personally like the 4 areas. And when we were talking to Monica, we said, look, you have 4 areas. I know you said a blank canvas. I can tell you F&B would like to keep some of those canvases blank 5, 6 years down the road. The wilderness area, the coastline, and maybe more. We don't want, you know, that
It may not be an F&B thing, it just may be the right use for the property.
Right,
That's a whole other
we don't want that old song, tear it down and build a parking lot thing here, you know?
Yep.
So that's something that was mentioned. We built our own pro forma. We really weren't happy with what we were getting and what we weren't getting. But one of the things that we did was build it under the concept that we're going to continue what's most important to the citizens of the town, which is quality town services and an excellent school system. So a 2.5 operating budget doesn't work for us. We put in 3.25%, which is more reasonable. We put in projects that, I'm having an echo. We put in projects that, that we don't believe was in the Board of Finance's budget. So we have 2.8 million for fire engines that we know we're buying in 2 years. We put in the reimagined libraries. We know we're doing something at Middlesex, the high school, and Tokenie. It's about $3 million spoke to Duke, and even when we thought it would be done. We put in fixing the dam. We know something has to be done at Pear Tree, whether or not it's a boat ramp, raising the parking. So we put in money there and we bonded this stuff. So we also did another bonding where we put in some investment down the road.
And Monica's
Monica's
just joined.
So she takes priority.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Monica. How are you? Thanks for joining us.
I'm good. I'm good. How are all of you?
We're good. Do we have Mike Wheeler with us?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay. Mike, you're in the same room with Michael?
We're all in the room with me right now are Mike Wheeler, Jack Davis, Monica, Wayne, and Ed.
Okay. All right. Can I have a motion to pivot the conversation to go into executive session so we can get an update from Monica on a couple of privileged topics?
Anyone outside of us remote? Well, you're all okay.
Yeah,
and-
once I get the motion to go into executive session, then we'll go through the logistics of locking the meeting down.
Okay.
Okay. So I see Amy Zabatakis made a motion. Caroline seconded. Okay. All right. All right. It is 8:33, and we are going to be going into executive session at this point. Okay.
You have to stop the
All right.
recording.
This conference will now be recorded.
Okay. It is now 8:55. We are out of executive session and back to resuming our general meeting for the Planning, Zoning, and Housing Committee. My apologies to the people who were patiently waiting to join our meeting. I thank you for hanging in there. I can see Jim Palin is with us. Kate Bush is also with us. Looks like Patty B. Is that Patty Baumgartner? I think Patty B might be with us. That might be Patty Baumgartner. Okay. All right. So, Caroline, did you get all that? I'm just doing a housekeeping. Kate Bush. All right. Okay. All right. Now we also have Jim Palin with us. So if there's any additional questions with regards to financing, or we can certainly dive into that. But before we do that, let's make sure any planning, zoning, and housing issues, any additional questions that we have, we get those topics out, because that's really, financial is definitely a thread through everybody's committee, but our due diligence is with regards to the property acquisition from a planning and zoning perspective. I don't have any additional questions that we had from a holdover. Is there any? I'm going to open it up to the group. We have Monica McNally, Jim Palin, Ed Vinci from Public Works, Wayne Fox from a legal perspective. So if there's any, we've got an incredible team of resources at our disposal right now. Now's the time to ask any questions that you have.
This is Mike Wheeler. This is Mike for Ed and Jim and Monica and Jack. Jack, you talked about F&B last night, and I haven't watched your meeting yet, looking at different issues that might come up and figuring them in the budget. Are you comfortable there's enough resources for what the water mitigation studies show us for the flooding issues down in town, that several months ago, before this came up, you talked about how great that expense could be to solve those water mitigation problems, and to what degree you weren't going to spend $5 million to solve the water mitigation for one house, but overall, we're in the process of a water mitigation study. Are there going to be resources there to address that issue in town?
I have to go back to something that was said at the Board of Finance meeting from their MA, the municipal advisor. Even though our debt will rise, and we have a slight difference between what the Board of Finance is suggesting and what F&B thought it might be, Darien will still have significant access to the credit markets if it's necessary for both the Board of Ed, the town, and the sewer. And they're treated differently, and that's set by the state of Connecticut. I do believe that even F&B did, which we'll go over eventually on Monday, is that we built it as if the town was continuing to operate. And therefore, we ensured that there was appropriate funds in our unassigned fund balance, keeping it at an appropriate level for anything that happens. I believe that there is enough funds, there's enough access to the credit markets, without having significant additional effect on the tax burden to our citizens. Part of it's going to be the final structure, and I've said this in virtually every meeting I've been in. The Board of Finance has done an absolute excellent job in managing our debt, figuring out when we're paying principal and other things like that. We are seeing, and Jim can talk about it, we're seeing another $4 to $5 million go down in debt based upon that structure. So there's still going to be options out there. This is proposed to be 30-year debt after we do 2 notes, and I'll explain why that happened at the full RTM meeting. But the town, the $24 million that we have for the schools could also go for 30 years in any of those tranches, should the Board of Finance decide to do that. And that, if necessary, would free up some additional debt service. Yeah.
So I think what Mike is asking is, we did a couple of surveys, flood surveys, and we have money aside. We have $1 million put aside for remediation on Grove Street, and we have $1.5 million put aside for remediation over on Saltbox. Those were funds that were dedicated from the ARPA funds.
Yeah, I guess I agree with everything. I'm just saying we could have more funds if needed. We have access to those funds, and they would be used prudently when we need it. But it's there.
Yeah.
Jack, it's Jim here. So I would just add, and Dan's here with me. I have no concern in the town's ability, if we need to issue additional debt for important infrastructure or other capital projects that are unexpected, that we'll have the ability to do it. And as you rightfully pointed out, we have a lot of sort of tools in our bag in terms of how we amortize and structure the debt to make sure to be able to minimize the impact, to the taxpayer.
And they do a very good job at it. And I'm a critic if it needs to be critical. And that one I'll give them triple 5-star rating on.
Werner, I saw your hand up, Werner.
Yes, thank you. James Werner Domitner here. Hi. I had questions from a number of constituents around financial impact, and I was able to answer what the implications are from the purchase standpoint for the taxpayer. But where I couldn't give any answer is any idea on the operating and capital investment cost scenarios that we could have going forward. Obviously, like with buying with a house, you have maintenance cost, and you have, obviously we will have capital investment costs. Is there anything that you kind of looked into where you could give us an idea what's in kind of what zip codes that could be over a particular period and what they would mean for the taxpayer?
Yeah, Werner, as part of our analysis that we put together, we looked at a sample $8 million of investment in Great Island, which could come in the form of anything from parking lots to walking paths to bathrooms to anything. And we looked at making an $8 million investment over 4 years. Each $8 million that we would invest in the property, again, this excludes any private participation, each $8 million would add just under $50 of incremental taxes for the median homeowner.
Werner, I'm going to give you an F&B response to that. We put in $21 million of investment over the 5 years. The incremental cost is 1.1 basis points, and that's in the fiscal year 28 for all of those costs associated with Great Island, including the bonding of that 21 million, as well as putting in $750,000 for operating costs in the Board of Selectmen budget on that. So I think Jim's model comes out to be about 90 basis points, so we're off by 20 basis points or so from looking at both of those areas. So that's the incremental cost is, the incremental cost is about 1 basis point per year going forward, maybe a little bit more. As I said, we're about 1.1, maybe it rises to 1.2 if we go out 10 years, but I didn't go out that far. Does that answer your question?
Could you,
I
could you, this is Kirk Ruddy, could you put that in dollar terms?
Yeah. I will promise you that when I send it out, you guys will see the dollar terms. What I did is, while Jim talks about the median income, the last page of the analysis has what the appraised value is for a series of homes and a series of values and what their costs are, as well as what their incremental costs would be over the 5 years based upon Great Island. And so rather than going through everybody's home, I promised that as soon as I got done with this analysis, my housemate came running over and looked over the show to see what our cost was. So it will be out tomorrow, all right? And that's the best I
can. Kirk, in our analysis, again, it was just under $50 for a $1.25 million appraised home, which is $850,000 on the grand list. And so if your house is double that, you would just double that number.
Great, thank you.
So we'll basically take it up from the 650 to, would it just add the 50 a year, or would it add the 200 a year?
No, 50 total over 5 years. So if we bonded $8 million over the next 4 years, you know, the effect of in your 5-year taxes would be $50.
Okay. And it's 8, and the 8 million is in total over 4 years, or is it 4 times 8 million?
No, it was 2 per year for 4 years. Would at the end of the 5th year increase your taxes by 50 for a homeowner with, you know, assessed at 850 and valued at 1.25.
Understood.
And you know, I would remind everybody as we think about, you know, as the town thinks about how they want to invest in this island, you know, after it's purchased and they begin to sort of matriculate out of leases and so forth like that, any expenditure is going to have to go through the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance, and ultimately come to the full RTM.
Yeah, maybe just an additional, you know, point. I asked the real estate agent what she would estimate how much it would cost to renovate just the main house, and her answer was anywhere between 7 and 10 million. So you know, if those 8 million in total, of course, do not include any renovation costs of the main house, for example. So for me, it's more around operating costs and some minor infrastructure.
Again, I'm going to interrupt. You will have tomorrow the F&B analysis. we do not have 8 million. We have 6 million in there for infrastructure. It's funny that that's what she said. We did just a rough guess saying we're spending about 24 million per school. You know, I don't know exactly what it needs in remediation, this is not my expertise. This is where I would look to Ed and say, what do I have to do? But that's why we put in $15 million in there over 5 years, you know, to make things ADA compliant, all these other things that we do as a town. So our numbers aren't that far off, but it does have the monies in there. And, you know, I don't go $50 per house or other things like that. I'm saying this is what the effect is on the whole town. Because if you look at the 5 year that we're projecting, you're going to see what we see at the budget every year, and you'll see what's affected there. So that's my response. I'm going to get it out to you tomorrow. I just needed to make some verbiage changes and just do a better write-up so that it's not just a number floating out there, and then have a PDF and it'll be sent out to everyone. And my telephone number's there. I've been answering everybody's phone call, but if I get too many of them, you're going to have to explain to somebody why I haven't done any of the projects in June that I promised.
Yep. But Jack, the point I was trying to make is whether it's the 6 or the 8 million that we put on the piece of paper is not enough to cover the renovation of the house.
Okay, Werner. So first of all, going back to the operating costs, it's not a big number, but the net revenue of $430,000 a year that we hope to receive includes $100,000 worth of maintenance. So that's your ongoing maintenance until we make any changes to the property. Now, we have looked at all of the buildings. Mike Beatty has been out there. Ed has been out there several times. Most of the buildings are in very good shape. You're discovering the one that is a unknown. The main residence, we don't know what we'll do with that. That looks to be, it could be a terrific income generator, right? So we would do a cost analysis and make sure that whatever we were putting in, we would have a decent return on. That is the one building that will take a lot of work and will probably be one of the latter ones to develop. However, I do have some good news, and that is that there have been weddings on that property that haven't needed to use the building. So my thought is we generate some income from some weddings on the property before and bank that and use those funds to do some of the work on the main property.
Thanks, Monica.
You're welcome.
I have one more question I ask. Do we have, and what are our thoughts of continuing to be landlords, or basically moving the current tenants in these? I think it's 8. Well, the riding stable is another one out. I mean, obviously that will result in some income loss as well.
We will be keeping the tenants in place. They have indicated an interest in wanting to stay, and we would like to continue to generate the free cash flow, especially since it's going to take some time to decide what we want to do there, right? So in the short term, we hope that they will stay. What was your other question? I forgot. You thought you asked two.
No, that was answered. Thank you.
All right, Amy Zapatakis, you have had your hand up.
Well, my question actually ties into what Werner just asked, which is, and that ties into that special purpose fund that is covering with taking the rentals in and covering the expenses. Have you calculated whether that the special purpose fund revenue is enough to cover the expenses without the stables? Just I have concerns about the town collecting rental income from a property that they've issued a cease and desist on.
Right.
Yes, it is sufficient.
Yep, I know you're pretty
great
on that, and that we will still be cash flow positive on that. But yes, the stables, if we do not receive any kind of a special permit from the town from planning and zoning, then the stables will be disbanded as an ongoing operation.
F&B also looked at that and felt that the revenue from the other 8 areas will produce more than enough revenue to cover the expenses that they have and some incremental ones that we may add on.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions that we have for Ed from Public Works, Wayne from a legal perspective, Monica's Board of Selectmen, Steve Olvani, Public P&Z, Kate Bush from an operating, budgetary perspective, Jack Davis. You all know that we have to come to a decision, but I want to make sure everybody's had a last chance to ask any questions of all of this think tank that we have with us, before we come down and have to, pick what side of what answer you're going to raise your hand for on Monday night, or what we're going to recommend to the RTM. Any other questions for the group?
Yeah, I have one more. Did we look into the possibility of using what I call the little harbor over there for potentially putting mooring in there? Because I was told that the tide is not that high in that harbor, and that we might fit 20, 30 moorings in there. And it might not be dredging.
Yeah. Yeah, you know what, Werner, that's something that we'll take a look at, but that's not something that we've included in any financial analysis.
Yeah, because there could be some revenue as well.
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you, Amy.
All right. Well, I want to thank everybody for their time. Thank you very much to our Board of Finance, Planning and Zoning Commissioners, Board of Selectmen, staff from the Town Hall. We really appreciate you taking the time on a Thursday night at 9:15 to meet with our group. I think the next, as we mentioned before, we have certainly a lot more information than we did a week ago. I think we have a little bit more clarity with regards to assumptions that our town officials are making, and some assumptions that we know we just have to have a longer term view, that we just aren't going to have those answers on. But we do need to come down and make a decision. So with that, if I could call for a motion to vote, we've received the resolutions. I sent them to you. There's 3 of them. Their wording might change a little bit between now and Monday, but one is for the consideration to approve the purchase of the property commonly known as Great Island. The resolution goes into more details with regards to acreage, who owns it. It's been approved by the selectmen. It's been approved by the Board of Finance. The second resolution is involving the appropriation of the $103,475,000 for the property purchase and the bonding that corresponds with it. And then the last resolution is what Jack alluded to earlier about establishing the special revenue fund to match revenues and expenses to keep a closed loop on the Great Island. And that's more of an accounting maneuver that we need to do. So I'm not going to call votes for all 3 of these resolutions because I think they pretty much go hand in hand. So if I could have a motion.
Sorry.
Pardon me?
Sorry, can I just ask, I just have a quick question. Are we voting for what we think that our subcommittee should recommend in the letter?
Yeah, we are.
We're voting for our recommendation as a committee that it was referred to. Is that right?
And Megan, that's a good point that you're pointing out, because we have a kind of a complicated role as an RTM official. We are tasked with our committee to evaluate and dig into issues regarding planning and zoning. But at the same time, we've all been elected by our district members to be their fiduciary and represent and cast a vote for them. So you might vote for, you think from a planning and zoning perspective, it's a great idea. And on Monday night, personally, you might opt differently. I personally feel that I have to be united and I have to kind of stand by what I say. So that's not my opinion, but it certainly could, it's an individual thing. We're going to report out to the full RTM on Monday, and in that report will be the topics that we've encountered as a committee, what we dove into, what we learned, and then as a committee, how we felt the broader body should vote.
Right. Okay.
And that's really
I just wanted to make total. I just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, that's the spirit under which we're calling this vote. Anybody have any?
I guess, sorry, I have kind of the same question as Megan, I think, which is, so depending on which way we as a committee vote now, you will write the report, but will that be circulated to us before it's given to the full RTM? I mean, I know we have like 4 days to do that, but I just want to make sure I understand the procedure.
Sure. I will absolutely, if the committee wants to see the report, absolutely. I will, when you give a report, I like to have it written up ahead of time because then you turn it into the clerk for the minutes. So I will certainly have prepared remarks that I will circulate to the committee. And part of that is, the dialogue of everything we've discussed, and then saying when we've called the motion to vote, we had a quorum and X said yes, X said no, X abstained, and then that's what we report out to the group. And then there might be dialogue back and forth of people asking particular more detailed questions that might be directed to us, or it might be directed to Steve or Monica or Jim. It's hard. It can go either way. It'll be a robust dialogue, I'm sure, on Monday. But as I mentioned before,
sorry.
Sure.
Did the Planning and Zoning Commission itself make any public, and I apologize that I probably should watch this, make any public remarks or public statement either for or against? Or
Sure. I'm going to turn this over to Steve, but the Planning and Zoning Department has a very small view, and they have to make a consensus report that says it's consistent with the town's plan. And part of the town's plan is definitely acquiring open space. But I'll turn that over to Steve to answer.
Thank you, Amy. The P&Z is the first person that reviews this and writes a report on it. If the P&Z, as per state statute, has to approve any acquisition or disposition of properties in the town, and that has to be consistent with the town plan of conservation development. So it actually, before you get into anywhere, it's got to get approved by the P&Z, and that's if the question comes from the Board of Selectmen. And the answer to that is yes. We wrote a positive report on it when it came to us at the very beginning, which is now probably about a month ago.
Can I ask a follow-up, actually, because I did watch the meeting, the planning and zoning meeting, and there was discussion during that meeting about, and I think we talked about this all as a group at the very first time we talked about this, wanting to have all, or not all probably, but at least a good chunk of the property dedicated as parklands. I think it might be helpful, because that's sort of directly in with our committee, for us to sort of take a tally among our group to say, is that something we would want to include on our report or recommendation, that it be dedicated, that all or any of this be dedicated parkland? I certainly think Jim Rand would be happy with me if I asked for that.
Yes, that topic did come up in our P&Z hearing when we talked about our P&Z general. Then we talked about it, but that is not our decision. That's a decision of the Board of Selectmen, because the example is, once something goes into the parkland designation, forever to come out of the parkland designation, it has to be, the parkland quote unquote acreage has to be replaced by something else. So it's not a decision on the P&Z on what it does. It comes from the it does come from the Board of Selectmen. We recommended it. That exact wording did not make it into our report to say that should be parklands. No.
And from a PZ&H perspective, this is Michael. I would not support that. I think it's too premature to recommend tying anybody's hands on something like that.
It's
I'm not sure I would vote for it either, but I do think it might be a worthwhile for this group to, just as a sort of sub point, discuss whether that's something we would recommend as a group.
Yeah, it's you don't, Mike Grisello, you don't get an argument from me on that, and Amy, you don't get an argument from me on that either.
Yeah.
But the only thing that matters is
I agree with Mike. I find it very limiting, and I would not support it.
the only thing that I think you also have to, and Jim Palin explained this at a meeting that he was at a while ago, relative to the bonding. If you're going to bond something on a long-term basis, and it creates income or it doesn't create income, that's something that affects the way the bonds get done. So I don't think you can make that decision for a while either.
Okay. Anybody else have questions regarding this topic?
I just wanted to make sure I was clear on kind of our mission tonight, which is, we're looking at this strictly through a planning and zoning lens, which refers, basically to land use, and we don't know what the land is going to be used for. So it's difficult to come to that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I understand your perspective, but I think we also have to have a general sense of reality in that it is not feasible to understand and project and get community input on a parcel of land that's 60 acres over what's best for the community. That process is going to be, if you do it right, a very long process. And it's one of those, the chicken or the egg. You're not going through that process for a hypothetical thing that you don't own, but yet we have a decision to make with regards to buying the property. That's the decision we're asked to make: buying the property and having faith that as a community we will, come to run a process that hears public voices and incorporates public voices and develops a thoughtful plan with governance that makes sense for this property. Go ahead.
Sorry, I just wanted to say, as far as for myself, the way that I'm trying to look at it, which ties into what Amy's saying, is if you are in evaluating this property, you think that it cannot be used in a way that is good for the community and good for your constituents, then you need to vote no. It's more about, can it be used for the uses, as opposed to deciding the uses now, because the uses, right, will go before Planning and Zoning Commission. There'll be a whole discussion. But if you think that it can't be used for the uses that make sense, then you have to vote no. If it can, then there are all these other things that go into it as far as voting yes. But that, I think, from a limited planning and zoning perspective, that's the way I think you can kind of get your head wrapped around voting on the unknown, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's actually helpful, because I've, this entire month or so, I've been wondering why were we even given this task when there's really nothing to plan or zone right now,
Yeah, and we're not. And to be clear, we're not planning and zoning commissioners. So that's not our job. That's Steve Olvani's job and the other members on his commission. And that's when the town of Darien, after the proposed purchase, they want to propose X, Y, or Z usage that requires a special permit. Then it comes in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission. There is public debate, and it gets, everybody gets their teeth into it. So that I like Amy's perspective on, if you think, boy, this is a useless piece of land and nothing can be done with it, why are we buying, it? Then no. If you think it's, the town can handle the financial obligations and you think it's going to be to the benefit of the residents of Darien today and forward residents, being good stewards for future generations, then you lean into the yes box. That's the way I look at it.
This is Jack Davis. I'm on rules, and so I can add something else to why the planning, zoning, and housing was assigned this. One of the big questions here that's before your committee is whether or not this is consistent with the town plan of conservation, which is the mandatory referral, because we can't buy anything without that. And so that's part of what we're looking for the committee to report on. Was a mandatory referral issue? Does the committee feel that this is consistent with
the town plan of development?
With town plan of development? And that's the primary thing. As I said, even F&B, where we're more into the numbers than that, we put placeholders here because, and Monica gets annoyed every time I say it, I don't care if we build the world's largest Chuck E. Cheese in that manor house, which he said we're not doing, but we have to have a placeholder for some dollar amounts, and we don't know exactly what needs to be done, nor we're doing it. But that is why P&Z and PZ&H was assigned this, is the mandatory and consistent with the town.
Yeah, and I think thank you for that, Jack, and thank you for that, Amy, because I think it crystallizes, is it consistent with our plan? I think personally, I think overwhelmingly yes, and the details as to all the details that we dove into over the last 3 meetings, is there anything that would prevent the development of this land in a way that would be to the benefit of the town? And those were the issues that we kind of dove into. So we have the best information that we're going to have. I don't imagine there's going to be any more clarity on the issues that were discussed under executive session, or any of the other issues between now and Monday. And we owe it to the RTM body to give a recommendation from our committee. So with that, I'll ask again, can I have a motion to vote?
Motion from Kirk Ruddy.
Okay. Kurt? Second from anybody?
Second, Susan.
Second with Susan Lauritsen. Okay. All right. I am going to call for all those in favor. We have a fair amount of people that are on, don't have a display. So I'm going to do a voice roll call. So I'm going to go down the list. Priscilla, are you still with us?
Yes.
And your vote is?
Yes.
Yes. Michael Casolo.
Yes.
And again, you can, if you're not a yes, then you can say pass, and then you're either a no or an abstain. Mike Wheeler.
Yes.
Scott Zimmerman.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Kurt Ruddy.
Yes.
Werner DeMittner.
From a PCNH standpoint, few in favor, yes.
Okay. Dan Guller.
Yes.
Megan Kilcourse.
Yes.
Amy Zavatakis.
Abstain.
Abstain. Okay. Mary Nevin is not with us. Susan Lauritsen.
Yes.
Caroline Luz.
Yes.
Sandra Conway,
Yes.
and Emily Salmore is not here, and I am recording my vote as a yes. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 members voting yes, 1 abstention, and 2 absent. Okay. I really, really appreciate the wrestling match that we've all gone through over the past 3 meetings. We've had some excellent engagement, excellent questions, and I know this was a hard decision. I will circulate my report summary and happy to have recommendations as you review it. Please feel free to, give me your 2 cents if there's something you feel very strongly. I don't need 12 editors, but if you feel really strongly that I've included something that I shouldn't or otherwise that is not a representation of the group's work, please let me know. Thank you, everybody. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
I moved, we adjourn.
Werner and Amy, I saw, and Michael. Okay, all those in favor? See you later.
Aye.
It's 33.
Aye.
Thanks, guys.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you,
Thank you,
everybody.
Amy.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks for